The Hyatt conference badge had my name in a font that tried to cheer me up. Under it, a ribbon read speaker, which was generous. I had 15 minutes on a side stage to explain why our tiny software company thought clearer calendars make kinder teams. I'd practiced the talk in front of the bathroom mirror with my son's rubber duck perched on the counter like a skeptical donor. What I didn't practice was seeing my wife step out of a ballroom with someone else's laughter all over her. Nora wore a blazer that seemed to have sworn an oath of allegiance to her shoulders. Her hair had that deliberate mess journalists favor. She looked powerful, which was a look I used to think I had the monopoly on admiring. She didn't see me. The man with her lean, silvered at the temples, conference handsome in the way that happens when you know which shirt collars behave under lanyards, touched the small of her back as they walked. It wasn't obscene. It was worse, familiar. I could have pretended I was on my way to the restroom, like any other civilian caught in the draft of someone else's weather. Instead, I followed at a respectable distance that wasn't respectable at all. They turned down a hallway toward the meeting rooms with numbers instead of birds. I heard the word panel, then debrief, then Nora's low chuckle that has always seemed to contain a map I wanted to learn by heart. Rooms 217 and 218 had doors propped open like suggestions. Room 219 was closed. The hallway hummed with air conditioning and ambition. I stood at a table with coffee urns that had been polished into moral dilemmas. My mind split and argued in both directions. When you love someone, espionage feels like a kind of devotion. When you love yourself, it feels like a kind of injury. A minute later, Nora emerged alone. She scanned the corridor and froze when she saw me, the way light freezes on water when a cloud passes. "Jay," she said carefully, as if my name were a delicate thing she didn't want to break. "You're early." "For my talk," I said, "or for whatever we're calling this." I nodded toward 219. She lifted her chin a fraction. "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what I think," I said, "because I can't seem to locate the kinder version." She pulled me into 218, a room with chairs in obedient rows and a screen frozen on a slide that read "Thank you." In a font that had bitten off more exclamation marks than it could chew, she closed the door. "His name is Eric," she said. "He runs a magazine. He's been courting our agency for ad space. He's also been courting me." The bluntness landed like a pen set down firmly on paper. "You've let him," I said. Saying it out loud rearranged the furniture in my chest. "How long?" "3 weeks." She folded her arms like she was trying to hold herself in place. "I'm not sleeping with him." "You're sleeping next to me and somewhere else at the same time," I said. The sentence came out too elegant for how ugly the feeling was. "Do you want to be caught?" "No," she said, then winced at the speed of it. "Maybe I wanted to be stopped." I leaned against a chair, which didn't ask to bear that weight. "We need to decide whether we're in a marriage or a series of very moving press releases," I said, more exhausted than angry. Nora sat 3 chairs away as if we were in a class and the teacher had given us an assignment called "Don't Lie." "We've been courteous," she said. "Courteous is good for neighbors and baristas. It's terrible for vows." "I thought courtesy was one of our vows," I said. "But you're right. We've been so careful with each other we stopped being honest." We stared at the screen with its frozen gratitude. Nora's hand went to her necklace and stopped. "He makes me feel like a hot take," she said. "You make me feel like a peer-reviewed study. I know which one is valuable. I don't always know which one I want on a Thursday." I let out a breath that felt like a release valve on a submarine. "I like being the study," I said, "but not if it means I'm also the control group for your impulsiveness." Then the universe did something gauche. My phone buzzed with a calendar notification about the talk I was supposedly giving. The title, Graceful Boundaries in Digital Work, blinked at me with the kind of irony that belongs on bumper stickers. Nora saw it and barked a laugh that had nothing to do with humor. "Go," she said. "I'll be here when you're done. We'll finish this in 219, or we won't." I walked to the side stage with the kind of focus you find when there's a cliff behind you. My 15 minutes landed well because I believed what I was saying maybe more in that moment than ever. That the boundaries we draw around our time and attention are declarations of dignity. People nodded and took photos of slides they would never read again. When it ended, strangers shook my hand in the gentle, grateful way you pat a dog that isn't yours, and I felt the absurdity of being admired at the exact moment my life felt most misfiled. Back at 219, I knocked like a person who doesn't enjoy knocking. Eric opened the door. Up close, he looked less like a magazine cover and more like a person who sleeps poorly. He glanced past me, expecting Nora, then registered the shape of my expectations. "Right," he said quietly. "Come in." The room smelled like coffee and paper. A notepad on the table contained a list of action items that made a passionate case for their own reasonableness. Nora stood by the window with her arms wrapped around herself in a way that wasn't cold. Sunlight was choosing her cheekbones. I wanted to ask it to stop. "I'll make this easy," Eric said, clearing his throat. "I'm stepping back from the ad deal and the other thing. If you're here, I've misread the story I wanted to be in." He delivered the lines like a man who'd done well in school and continued to perform it out of habit. "You didn't misread it," Nora said softly. "You just forgot there was an index." She turned to me. "I want to go home with you." The sentence should have split me into confetti. Instead, it made everything in me sit up straight. "Only if home isn't where we store denial," I said. "I can forgive an almost. I can't survive a pattern." Eric nodded at me, at a future where the magazine would find another agency and his elbow would learn the shape of someone else's spine. "Understood," he said. He held out a hand. I didn't take it. He didn't flinch. He left. The door clicked shut and the room went briefly, completely honest. Nora turned to me with eyes that were not asking for absolution so much as permission to work. "I'll draft the email to him now," she said. "You can read it before I send it." "Send it to yourself first," I said. "Make a copy, print it, tape it to your desk, not as punishment, as a reminder that clarity can be an act of love." I surprised myself with how little rage I had left. Maybe I had spent it all practicing in imaginary arguments with the mirror. She typed. I watched the words bloom on the screen, direct, unpoetic, accountable. The click of send sounded less like a gunshot than I'd feared and more like a lock engaging. We sat with it for a minute, breathing as if we'd both climbed a long flight of stairs. "Do you remember that tiny spoon from our wedding registry?" I asked, "because sometimes your heart grabs a weird rope. The one you loved because it had a star at the end of the handle." "You said it was too fussy," she said, a smile fighting to exist. "I used it yesterday to stir sugar into your coffee," I said. "The star lived through the dishwasher again. I want more of that, small, silly survivals." Nora's laugh this time was less of a bark and more of a beginning. "Take me home," she said. "We can put the spoon somewhere it belongs." On the drive, she reached over and rested her fingers on my knee without apology. It felt like a confession that had chosen gentleness as its language. We told each other unglamorous truths, that we were bored sometimes, that boredom is just a house with the lights off, that we could, together, learn where all the switches were. We made a list not of rules but of habits. Friday walks without phones. Sunday dinners with our son's rubber duck officiating at the sink. A monthly check-in where forgetting to be brave was not an option. We got home to a kitchen that smelled like oranges pretending to be sunshine. Nora took out the tiny spoon and slid it into the jar with the sugar. "There," she said, "every morning a small star." That night we didn't audition for passion. We auditioned for patience. Her foot found my ankle, a touch so ordinary it felt like a radical idea. I slept like people do in houses with lights they know how to turn on. The next day the conference posted photos of me on their website, my name spelled correctly beneath a quote about boundaries and kindness. Strangers wrote emails. I answered them in the measured tone of someone who believes what he said and is trying, one coffee spoon at a time, to believe it at home too.